So welcome, both of you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And I'll just make a note that Dr. Fuhrman has been a great inspiration for me and a source of knowledge to the extent that he wrote the foreword for the Sprout book by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. So just like it's a pleasure and an honor to be on the same platform with Dr. Fuhrman.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug. Same here.
My pleasure.
So why don't you, in your own words, just take a minute just to, for anyone who doesn't know you, to introduce yourself and tell us what you've been doing the last 5 years and get us up to speed. Doug, why don't you go first?
So 5 years ago, actually 7 years ago, I moved to the Mojave Desert to a little town called Wonder Valley. And it's the desert, but it was also a food desert, and I had no access to food. And so I had known about sprouting for 30 years, but I never took sprouts seriously. And here was my opportunity to have a great discussion with myself to say, hey, if I want to live here in this beautiful oasis where I had water and sun, how am I going to grow my own food? And the answer was sprouts. And within 30 days, I was growing and eating in 1 cubic foot thousands of calories of sprouts every day in 6 jars. And miraculously, 30 days later, I was eating just sprouts. Now I eat sprouts and fruit and seaweed and other things. But at the time, I was eating just sprouts. And I was concerned, maybe I was going off the rails. Maybe there was something wrong with this. So I started to do deep research, and I reached out to Dr. Joel Fuhrman and Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. Joel Kahn and a bunch of other professionals. And turned out that all of these people that I had so much love and so much respect for also loved sprouts. And so that inspired me to write the Sprout book. So I wrote the Sprout book. And then, at 52 years old, I opened up a TikTok account and an Instagram account. And my book launched during COVID, where my book tour was canceled. And so I started to use social media, and since then I've posted, 1,000 times, and I've been on a dozen podcasts about sprouting. And I really see the opportunity for sprouts to go mainstream. And that's been my mission and my focus, along with the singer-songwriter, mountain climber, Mike Posner. We started the Sprouting Company to get the message out there. But as I wrote in the Sprout book, you can sprout in anything. I designed some tools to make it easier, and I curated some seeds. But my mission really is about getting people healthy and having them eating more fresh, ripe, raw plants and organic vegetables, and getting off the trappings of salt, oil, sugar, processed food, ultra processed food, meat, dairy, and animal products.
Thank you. Dr. Fuhrman?
Well, the last few years I've been living in a bunker in the Mojave Desert, when just living on lizards and cactus roots, seeing if I could survive. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
The best. Okay. So
anyway,
on a real note, Joel, what have you been doing?
Well, I've worked pretty hard writing books and doing these television shows for years, and seeing patients full time. The last 5 years, I've cut back, and I've opened a retreat in San Diego because I felt that so much of my heart over the years have seen people who have known about this work and could have saved their lives. And for some reason, they didn't have the skills or the tools to do it on their own. So I felt like I could still keep my connection. I didn't want to just speak and write anymore. I like to see people and get to know them and work with them. So I didn't want to give that up. So my retreat in San Diego, I let people come here and they stay for a month or 2 or 3 to continue my love of watching people make radical recoveries, remove their lupus, their headaches, their heart disease, their psoriasis, and the food. So you know what it is? So many people learn about this information, but they don't apply it to their lives. And there's something stopping them from applying it to their life and so much social, you could say, negativity that precludes them from, and kind of confusion that precludes them from being successful, living so healthfully. So I built a retreat in San Diego so I could still get the personal satisfaction of working with people, but really make sure I impact people and they leave with the tools they need to do this on their own. So I've been doing that over the last 5 years and really loving it. And my wife and I are very involved with the guests we have here. We make new friends for life. We play games with them, and we might play pickleball or go for hikes. And so I'm not working quite as much as I used to, but I'm still doing meaningful work that's particularly rewarding to me, that I really love doing. So I've moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I also been growing much more of my own food, and of course, looking to, I do get sprouts, and I do utilize sprouts and always have, but I'm trying to get but now that I have your new sprout machine, I'm definitely going to start using it now and getting multiple machines. I've just been so busy and didn't have the full staff to devote to it, but it's really, I'm excited about adding that to our offerings as well,
Great, thank you.
Music to my ears, Dr. Fuhrman. Music to my ears.
So, Dr. Fuhrman, you've been doing this for a long time. You've written lots of books. You've given great advice. So the question is, at this point, based on your career experience and follow-ups with real people, what outcomes have you observed? What strategies have proven effective or ineffective in disease prevention? What are the most impactful steps one can take to avoid to avoid illness? How many individuals have you worked with? How confident are you in your findings? How often does this not work? In other words, we assume someone's doing what you say. What should they expect, and how often does it actually work and not work?
You sure you don't have any other questions to ask me in there?
I do, but I like that one.
That was like 20 questions in one. Okay. Well, first of all, most people in America are very sick, and about 90% are overweight, and about 70% are obese or severely overweight. And and their health deteriorates so tragically and rapidly as that once they pass the age of 60, that it really has been sad to see so many people with tragic lives as they age in this unprecedented opportunity where where nutritional science has made such radical advances, where we have the knowledge and the tools to enable people to live to be 95 to 105 years old. I mean, my opinions are radical. What makes my opinions radical is I'm saying that, you ask a lot of people, a lot of doctors in the plant-based movement, cardiologists, and they'll say, yeah, we could prevent 60, 70% of most heart disease, and we could help a lot of people. But my 40 years in this movement and taking care of so many patients, and I'm saying, well, using more than 20,000 people I've cared for over the years. So I've really been in the trenches using nutritional excellence to reverse disease. And I've had so many hundreds, if not thousands of people with advanced heart disease, diabetes, and all types of diseases reverse, that it's my impression that it's not like 60 or 70%, it's like 95%. It's like we really can reverse and protect people from heart disease in like 95% of the cases. It's very rare that we can't. In some, there's some things you can't help. They're so advanced, or maybe there's some genetic component or valvular component. There's always something that's not going to work. But my results I have to say, have been more radical than what most people are reporting. And I think it's because of my no compromising attitude and my working closely with the individuals who are sick. And I've seen that not just with reversing heart disease, but also with recovery from autoimmune conditions, such as lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, psoriatic arthritis, mixed connective tissue disease, and multiple sclerosis. I'd have to say that over the years, a lot of my practice has been involved with people with serious autoimmune disease, and me working with them to not just give them a dietary assignment or a diet style, but to tweak the diet and to adjust what they're doing, supplements, diet, food, elimination diets, fasting, and just working with them to help them on a one-to-one basis, customizing it to their needs to make sure to assure or to increase the probability of the making of complete recovery. And a lot of people, for example, with rheumatoid arthritis, and by the way, I left out multiple sclerosis. Many, many, many people with multiple sclerosis in my book, Eat for Life, I think I must have included at least 5 cases of MS that reversed themselves, and a very, very high success rate with MS, unless it's there's a certain type of MS that gets very advanced, and it gets so advanced where people get wheelchair confined. It's not relapsing and remitting; it's degenerative MS, and if that advances, it doesn't seem to be reversible. But still, the majority, that's more rare. So I'm saying in most cases, people can make complete recoveries through nutrition, and the point here is that the tools available to the conventional physician, where they're just utilizing drugs that are toxic and cause cancer, are so limited. A person goes to a rheumatologist for an autoimmune disease, or a cardiologist for heart disease, or an endocrinologist for diabetes, is not getting proper care. They're getting second-grade care because the person doesn't have any tools that can enable this person to make recovery, and their only toolbox are drugs that just are like sweeping the dust under the rug. They're just like controlling symptoms while the person's health and their condition deteriorates and their lifespan gets shortened by the medical treatment rather than lengthened. So I have to say that I'm very much passionate about what I do, because what I've seen and the cases that you asked me, these cases, and I could give you an example of a teenager who was on the National Renal Transplant list waiting for a new kidney with a creatinine of 4.2, which means 90% of her kidneys destroyed. And when she came to me, she made a complete recovery, to my astonishment, and her creatinine went down to 0.8. So watching lupus patients get well, and watching people with type of renal nephropathy go away, with autoimmune hepatitis get better. All these unusual and rare diseases makes the diagnosis less important, and the intervention, the nutritional intervention, more important. So the answer to your question is yes. I'm very blessed to have so many people put their faith in my care over the years, and be able to work closely with them, and to enable so many people to make recoveries. And I think that's the most exciting part of my career. It's not being on television. It's not getting best-selling books. It's not getting accolades. It's really working with people and being in that room with them, to enable them to get better and feel the joy of them making a recovery and getting back to having a normal life again. That's really my most joyous part of my career has come from. And I know you asked some other part of the question I didn't answer.
That's good. Thank you very much. That was great. Doug, what are the nutritional benefits of sprouts, and how does sprouts compare nutritionally to vegetables? What is different nutritionally between broccoli and broccoli sprouts, onions versus onion sprouts, radishes versus radish sprouts?
I mean, an analogy would be comparing them to stem cells. Like, they are the junior version of the plant, and they're very concentrated. So in their concentrated form, they have high percentages of the micronutrients, the phytonutrients, the encrytin proteins, that they're in this concentrated format. So if you think about alfalfa sprouts versus alfalfa hay grows maturely and has a lot of fiber and insoluble fiber, but several of the nutrients get diluted. In the case of broccoli versus broccoli sprouts, the majority of people today that are consuming broccoli sprouts are consuming them for the purpose of getting sulforaphane, which is a glucosinolate which comes from glucoraphanin. And it turns out that the reason why broccoli sprouts can have 20 to 100 times the amount of glucoraphanin than mature garden stage broccoli is because as the broccoli is growing from broccoli seed to sprout to microgreen, the amount of glucoraphanin is getting diluted. So by the time you're at the mature plant, there's only a trace amount of that compound in it. So not all things are less, right? You're getting more fiber, you're getting more vitamin C, you're getting a lot as the plant grows. But on a macro level, sprouts are considered to have 20 to 100 times the nutrient density of mature vegetables of the same sort.
Okay. And are there any sprouts? Is there a pecking order, or is broccoli sprouts just gotten the most attention and actually onion and radish are also equally as good, or is broccoli really in its own league?
I think broccoli has been studied the most. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of peer-reviewed published literature on broccoli sprouts for their chemoprotective properties, for their ability to help regulate insulin levels in diabetics, for their acting as a inflammatory agent for detoxifying benzene from the lungs. But one of the insights that I had when I went down the sprout rabbit hole was that sprouts were vegetables, and vegetables are good for you. So, just for that sheer notion, all of the sprouts are good for you because they all have fiber, they have vitamin C, every sprout has every amino acid to form complete proteins. So sprouts in general are good for you. There are some sprouts, for example, pea sprouts, green pea sprouts, when sprouted in the dark for 5 days, produce DAO, which is a natural antihistamine. So there's things that are being discovered about the medicinal properties of sprouts that are unique. Now, in the case of chia sprouts and flax sprouts, they contain the medium chain fatty acid omega-3 in the form of ALA. So, that has higher concentrations, of the omega-3s. And so I think that we are just scratching the surface of this sprout revolution. And the more research that goes into sprouts, the more knowledge that will come out. Now, I have a question, Steve, that I'd love to ask Dr. Fuhrman, if that's okay.
Yes.
Dr. Fuhrman, we have an epidemic beginning around Ozempic for weight loss. And I know many people come to you for weight loss in addition to reversing chronic illnesses. How do you feel about sprouts stimulating the release of GLP-1 and other L cells in the body to help provide the same level of satiation that can be achieved through taking, the artificial weight loss drugs by slowing digestion and absorption of nutrients in the body?
Well, yes, I often discuss that point, is that one reason why people eating standard diet, they can't control their appetite and they desire more calories. And trying to have them eat the right amount of calories is almost impossible because the natural biological shutoff switches for eating are discombobulated or turned off. So we're taking a drug to like the GLP-1 inhibitors, whereas if you eat, of course, a healthy diet, but of course, if you mix together sprouts, green vegetables, beans, and nuts combined, the effect is to delay gastric emptying and stimulate the GLP-1 and make you feel satisfied. Further, so the sprouts can play a role in that, but also the resistant starch and the fibers, particularly the resistant starch in beans. Even a small amount of beans with a meal can have an effect to not just improve the lectin and GLP-1 receptors, but also to stimulate the apostat in the central nervous system that's controlled by butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid. Now, what we're talking here about is that the short-chain fatty acids are the body breaks down fiber and resistant starch into short-chain fatty acids. There are numerous short-chain fatty acids, acetate, propionate, butyrate, but butyrate is a particularly powerful anti-inflammatory fatty acid that has a negative feedback loop on the apostate in the central nervous system. So all these things work in conjunction with each other, as well as the nutrient density of the diet and of course the volume of the meal. So people, if they eat healthy enough, which I've been teaching for decades, we want a person to eat a diet that's rich in nutrients but lower in calories. And I'm saying that when you achieve nutritional excellence, it naturally has you desire less calories, the right amount of calories. The body's doesn't make a mistake. You get back in touch with your instinctual need for the right amount of calories. We don't see overweight, chipmunks and reindeer and coyotes running around the forests. They're all normal weight and they're all the same, and we don't see early primitive humans overweight either. It's when you eat so unhealthfully, these foods disrupt normal signals and they make us into food addicts. So at my retreat, we try to undo that. And of course, my teachings, everybody doesn't have to come to my retreat, obviously, I teach people how to eat healthfully, give them supportive, information and tools, and hopefully they can even do this on their own. But food is highly addicting, and it's getting them to comply with eating a diet so healthfully. And when they do that, of course, over time, they're going to more effectively desire the right amount of nutrients, the right amount of calories, and lose weight and gravitate towards their perfect and ideal weight for the rest of their life. The problem, obviously, you're talking about with the drug way of doing it, it's like smoking cigarettes to lose weight. It's anything we try to do in a fake manner, like going through gastric bypass or putting in a lap band. They work temporarily, but the people really, in most cases, don't learn how to eat healthfully enough, and eventually their ability to consume calories and their addiction still control their life. They don't get rid of the food addiction. It takes a lot of knowledge and training and education for people to learn how to eat healthfully and get rid of food addiction. And you can't just use a shot or a lap band to get long-term successful results, because as you know, they stop the shot, the weight comes back, and they're going to stay on it the rest of their life, or they can learn how to live healthfully. Plus the fact that in the history of medical care, doctors used to recommend estrogen for women, postmenopausal women, to help their bones be strong and to help think they're going to have less heart disease. And we found out after all these decades that actually it increased heart attacks and strokes and breast cancer, and we had to stop it. Doctors for years recommended proton pump inhibitors, kept people on them long term, but after 20 or 30 years, we finally figured out that those drugs caused heart attacks. And we told the medical profession is famous for advocating interventions that down the road, when more data comes in from larger numbers of people, when it's more widely used and 2 or 3 decades go by, we find that, cancer rates skyrocketed, heart attack rates increased, and this intervention we thought was the magic pill wasn't so magic after all. So we don't know the long-term effects from these drugs. We have to generally go with the assumption that the more efficacious something is, the more likely more toxic it is, more dangerous it is for long-term use. So we have to be cautious, and I could say that using nutritional excellence, so the person's brain functions better and their digestion functions better and they feel better and they lose their weight, is so incredibly effective. And losing weight is so easy when you eat right. And people are so excited about it. There's no reason they have to inject themselves with expensive and potentially toxic medications that could even cause cancer. We don't even know that yet.
Thank you. Doug, what can you sprout and what should we sprout? And also, what would be missing nutritionally if we lived off sprouts? So what can and should we sprout? And what would be missing nutritionally if we just lived off sprouts?
So fundamentally, all seeds sprout. So that's, one thing. What's been adopted for, the common terms of sprouting are alfalfa, radish, clover, broccoli, chia, lentils, peas are very popular for sprouting. And those can be sprouted very easily. And you can also, and those are all sprouted in a jar. If you want to sprout in a tray, you can sprout the chia and the flax. They will sprout there. You can also get the benefits of of sprouting chia and lentils very quickly by just making them into a paste, soaking them for 15 minutes, and then continuing to keep them wet. And that sheer process is reducing the lectins, the phytic acid, and the enzyme inhibitors. And then you could actually sprinkle them on as a paste. You could add them to a smoothie. You could just, scoop them out and eat them. But when I'm referring to sprouts, I'm talking about alfalfa, radish, clover, peas, lentils, and those are the primary ones. Now, the only thing that I think is not in that array of sprouts are vitamin B12 and vitamin D. They're getting soluble, insoluble fiber. You're getting a broad array of vitamin A, B vitamins. So you're getting so much in them, but I think you're not getting vitamin B12. You're not getting vitamin D. So everything else you can get. Now, I'm a little bit extreme when I went all sprout based. I believe that, sustainability, if you're having an array of fruits, vegetable, seeds, nuts, seaweeds, and sprouts, you can have enough variety to achieve everything. But sprouts are whole food, plant-based, and you get these extra benefits of sprouts that are almost removed from the dialogue of the general public. And that's the benefits of living foods, where when you're eating the sprout, you're eating the entire plant organism, the root, the shoot, the endosperm, the embryo, the seed coat. So you're getting this living, enzymatically rich food item, and you eat the whole thing. Where even like a microgreen or something out of the garden, it's being cut from the root structure. And we know we eat root vegetables, we eat roots in certain cultures and certain items, that the roots contain, a lot of positive nutrition. So you can get a lot of fiber, but it's a total mindset. And what you want to do is when people are shifting their diet, what I'm saying is, and I want everyone to be healthy. I think the more sprouts people are eating, the healthier they'll get. But what I recommend is add sprouts to your smoothie, add sprouts to your cereal, to your soups, to your wraps, to your sandwiches, you can juice the sprouts. Find a way to add sprouts to your diet. And then, as opposed to adding sprouts to a salad, you can make the salad filled with sprouts, where sprouts become the vegetable that's the center of the plate. And then you could add, someone said, oh, my brother, he really likes spaghetti, right? So we make a huge bowl of alfalfa sprouts, radish sprouts, and broccoli sprouts, and then we marinate it with a unsalted, non-oil tomato sauce, with some seasoning on it. And he's like, it tastes good, so he's eating it. But instead of having pasta noodles, which are empty calories that will spike the glycemic levels, the base is sprouts. And once we did that experiment, we found out, hey, we could add tahini, we could add balsamic, we could add all these other different sauces to the sprouts and make them interesting for people to eat.
Thank you. Dr. Fuhrman, we had Cyrus Khambatta and Robbie Barbero at our conference this year, and they both wrote the book Mastering Diabetes. And one of the main things they're saying is to avoid animal products and eat a whole food plant-based diet to lower your fasting blood sugar. And then when I asked Cyrus if you still have a fasting blood sugar between 100 and 120 and you're trying to get it down further, should you reduce plant fats, meaning seeds, nuts, avocados, and olives? Is that the next lever aside from exercise and resistant training and sleep? And he said, yes, fat in general, much more for animal products, but also, if needed for whole food plant-based fats, is interfering with the I guess, the sugar getting into the cells. So if someone is having fasting blood sugar between 100 and 120 and they can't get it to go down, do you recommend they remove the plant fat from their diet, meaning raw seeds, raw nuts, avocados, and olives?
Absolutely not. So let me explain, okay? Because there's a mistake here in describing and using the word fat and using the word oil, and not being more careful with what the studies do show, and the difference between using almond and an almond oil. And the other part of it is that the powerful effect at increasing early life death by taking all the fat out of your diet. In other words, we have more than 50 studies, and published a paper in I think a year ago or 2 years ago in the International Journal of Disease Prevention and Reversal. The paper was called, let me see if I've written down what the name of it was called. Oh yeah, it was called Nuts and Seeds for Heart Disease Prevention. It had over 50 references demonstrating that when you don't eat nuts and seeds, you increase risk of both cancer deaths and cardiovascular deaths. So we need the fat is so beneficial to promote human longevity. I've taken care of thousands of diabetics over the years that become non-diabetic, and they become non-diabetic in the first month. It's so fast which they become non-diabetic. Let me make the point here that yes, when you eat oil as a source of fat, oil is absorbed very rapidly into the bloodstream. I call it the caloric rush. And because it rushes into the bloodstream so rapidly, the body can't burn it for energy. It has to store it as fat. So it's storing fat in the cells that interfere with insulin resistance. It's putting fat in the body. It's storing fat that's distorting the insulin receptor. The fat you burn for energy and don't store that can't hurt your diabetes. In other words, when you eat nuts and seeds with the right amount, not so you're eating over your basal metabolic rate, not so you're eating more calories than you need, you're eating undershooting your calories. So because nuts and seeds are absorbed so slowly into the bloodstream, at let's say on the average of 1 calorie a minute compared to 50 calories a minute for oil. Now, the 1 calorie a minute, the body burns for energy. It doesn't store it as fat. And now we look at what do the studies show? And are there studies on diabetic patients seeing if we can improve their control by putting in oil, taking out oil, putting in nuts, seeds, and taking out nuts and seeds? And here's what the studies show, not just one study, but I'm saying there's so many studies that corroborate each other. And that when you keep the diet isocaloric, I mean, the diet is still the same amount of calories, and we take out some carbohydrate, and we put in some nuts and seeds, you see diabetic numbers improve in all these studies. You see because we're removing carbohydrates, so you're going to have less glucose being turned in, less of the carbohydrate converting into glucose, making for an insulin response. That works if the fat calories substitute for the carbohydrate calories and the fat calories are burned for energy. It doesn't work if your fat calories are stored as fat. So if you overeat nuts and seeds to the point where your body fat goes up, then Cyrus is right. But if my body fat, for a 70-year-old is pretty favorable. But what we're seeing that people following a nutritarian diet are focused on the quality of what they eat and the quantity of what they eat. Because when the quality is high enough, they're satisfied with the right amount of calories and they're losing weight and lowering body fat. Now, as their body fat is going down, their insulin resistance is going down, and they'll better control their glucose level. So this person you're saying, whose blood sugar is between 100 and 120, the question is, what's their body fat percent? Right? That's the most important thing. So Cyrus is right. His fat is inhibiting it, but it's the body fat that's inhibiting. So can we adjust their diet so they still get their body fat lower, right? And their insulin resistance go away. And we don't have to take out all the nuts and seeds to do that. And I recommend my overweight patients who are looking to lose weight, and the diabetics, still eat about a half an ounce of nuts and seeds with each meal for a total of 1.5 ounces a day. And the reason I come out to that figure of 1.5 ounces a day, it's because you absorb phytochemicals that prevent cancer from 0 with no fat to 20 to 50 times as much when you include some fat with the meal. One of the mechanisms via which you live longer by having nuts and seeds in your diet. But the other reason is because there's lots of data from the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2 on populations that are vegan and near vegan with different levels of nut and seed intake. And those had a half an ounce a day was in the second or third quintile. The lowest quintile was like a quarter of an ounce a day. And the highest quintile was around an ounce and a third a day was the lower level of the top quintile. And in the top quintile, you saw a 40% reduction of heart disease and about a 30% reduction in all-cause mortality. In other words, so much longer lifespan occurred in the people eating more than an ounce of nuts and seeds a day. So much longer that to tell people to take out all the fat to reverse their disease is not really ideal for their ultimate longevity. And it's also making the diet, you could say, stricter than it has to be for good health. And that was the question. That was what I brought up in the study on nuts and seeds for heart disease prevention and reversal. That my life is a testament to all these people with advanced heart disease, 100% blockages, cardiomyopathies, heart failure, really severe patients getting well. And I've published studies on that too. I published a study called The Improved Cardiovascular Parameters in a Nutrient-Dense Plant-Rich Diet, Patients Surveyed with Illustrated Cases. So I've had my own experience, and I don't see the need or the purpose in reducing fat that low because the evidence is overwhelming that it's not great for the person's long-term lifespan to cut fat back that low. And we can achieve that same benefit by moderately cutting back the fat and not reducing it all the way to nothing. You follow me?
By the way, I guess in fairness to Robbie and Cyrus, I don't think they actually said that the goal is to get to zero fat. They were just saying it's a lever to bring it down when you're having trouble getting your fasting blood sugar down. So I think they would probably agree that it's okay to have some amounts. But I guess I was pressing them to say, if your fasting blood sugar doesn't go all the way down, would you keep reducing the fats? And I thought they were saying yes.
Well, there's two comments on that. One is that, again, that when you are adjusting nuts, fat, we're talking about cutting back calories and putting some nuts and seeds in, not adding fat onto the existing amount of calories you're consuming. I want to make that clear too, because I'm supporting what they're saying as well, that if your caloric needs are 1,400 a day, we're talking about removing some other calories and putting some nuts and seeds in, not adding another 200 and 300 calories from nuts on top of it. And if you do that, if you remove some other calories and substitute nuts and seeds, then you get more weight loss, more diabetic benefits, and more lowering of blood sugar, not worsening if you remove carbohydrate calories and substitute in fat calories. So we have to be, it's not necessary to cut fat back to an extreme. And I want to say that once you cut all the nuts and seeds out, your fat content of your diet is between 7 and 9% usually. So a plant-based diet with no nuts and seeds is still about 7 or 8% fat. With nuts and seeds, it's about 15 to 20% fat. So we're talking about being in that 15 to 25% fat window, not in the ones with no nuts and seeds, in the 9% fat window, just from the other foods. When I wanted to make that clear as well. And
I was just going to throw in, for a time I was religiously entering my caloric intake and what I was eating in Chronometer, and one of sprouted garbanzo beans would take my fat, my percentage of fat from 5% to 15%. So, sprouts also, sprouted legumes like the sprouted lentils, sprouted peas, sprouted garbanzo beans have proteins and have fats in very large quantities. Yeah, they definitely have fat. So I think that if you're eating enough calories of plants, you're getting your appropriate amount of fat, like of fats and proteins. And I think the problem, with the seeds and nuts, Joel, when you say 1.5 ounces, I can inhale 1.5 ounces of nuts in a breath. That's very small amount. And most people, once they get their hand in the cookie jar, are eating handfuls of nuts. So
that's not what we see. That's not what we see. I've taken care of tens of thousands of people, and we give them the recipes. We tell them a half an ounce of nuts and seeds with each meal. They're not
So they're measuring.
they're not snacking on them. They're part of the dressings or sauces or recipes into the meal plans that we're not supposed to be snacking anyway, but they're not putting their hand in a jar and just shoving nuts in their mouth. You know, I mean, obviously there are people see, we're talking about food addiction and taking people who habitually overeat and have them the ability to habitually overeat nuts and seeds. That's a problem. Absolutely. The food can be as a concentrated source of calories, but that's something we deal with intellectually, emotionally, and is an important tool. And not, even though people complain about that, if you eat nuts, you eat too many of them, it's not what we see. We see them, they feel satiated with less calories. They feel satisfied with the meal now, and they feel that the meal lasts them. So they don't get hungry in between meals, and they wind up better able to control their caloric window when they have nuts and seeds in the meal, as opposed to removing them completely. And one extra thing I wanted to say is that, with this 80-10-10 idea that you're going to be 80% carbohydrate, 10% fat, and 10% carbohydrate, as advocated by some of these extremely low-fat vegan gurus, is that my practice over the last 35 to 40 years, I see people on different types of diets, and these people on these fruit-heavy, fruitarian diets that are low in fat, I think it's because they don't get enough protein. Because don't forget, the nuts and seeds add a lot of protein and fat to your diet. And oil, of course, as you know, oil in the food takes protein out of your diet. When you're pouring oil on your food, you've just extracted 10 grams of protein from your diet that way, because you could have had nuts and seeds, which would put the protein in. But in any case, when you have these fruit-heavy diets, they do well in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, but as they age, they lose their hair, they get fungal infections, their teeth get weak, their immune system gets weak, and they have their increased risk of pneumonia. And I'm not seeing great long-term outcomes on these diets that are too low in fat and protein when people are on these fruit-heavy diets. They do well when they're younger, but not when they're older, because as you age, the ability to assimilate protein goes down, and your immune system could suffer. You have neurological senescence, you have immunosenescence, neurosenescence, and of course, we lose muscle and bone too. But we want to do all these things right to keep the anti-aging. And I'm concerned about this, that some people, in removing the nuts and seeds and eating too much fruit in their diet, are going to do okay when but then they're not going to do that well over the age of 80, 75, 80, 90. And that's what I've seen in my career, is that we're trying to design a diet style that's good for the children and toddlers, but also good for the elderly, which need a little more nutrition. And it's another reason why I recommend the diet I do.
Thank you. Doug, a lot of people are saying, I don't really know what you guys are saying. Why should we take lentils, chickpeas, and green peas and eat them raw and sprouted? Everyone is saying to just buy them, maybe soak them, and then cook them and eat them. Why in the world would we sprout a lentil, a chickpea, or green pea when we could just cook it and everyone says that it's great for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And part of it is you can just cook them and eat them. When you sprout a lentil per se, by sprouting the lentil, you are increasing the vitamin C over 300%. You're tripling the level of antioxidants. And if you go down the rabbit hole further, you're increasing the resistant starch that gets decreased in the process of cooking them. So the sprouts become this new animal per se that you get to eat with benefits. And also, if someone has a problem with overeating, which several people, it's much easier to eat the cooked lentils and the cooked beans that are flavored and sauced and broken down than by the sprouts that you have to take the time to chew them. And by eating them slower and chewing them, you will fundamentally eat less. And the natural occurring structured water content of them is beneficial. So I think legumes and beans are healthy, cooked, raw, or sprouted. My preference is sprouting, but you're speaking to someone who promotes sprouting, but is overall part of a whole food plant-based diet.
Thank you. Dr. Fuhrman, the opening question I asked you, you gave a very positive answer saying that you thought that you could, eliminate 95% of heart disease roughly if we, when followed your protocol, whole food, plant-based diet, exercise, sleep, etc. What about your thoughts on how much we could avoid cancer and dementia if we follow your lifestyle, your diet and lifestyle?
It depends on what point age in life and how advanced it is. In other words, I have a lot of cases of dementia that have reversed themselves, even people who I thought that couldn't get better. But of course, as the disease gets more advanced, it becomes more reversible. So it's early stage dementia that's reversible, not late stage. And if we can catch people before they get demented, it's even going to be more protective. You follow me? So diseases become more irreversible, or the prediction value of giving to reverse it is going to be less as the person's disease advances. It's like with cancer too, in the early stages, in the precancerous conditions, it's more reversible, and a person has, metastatic cancer that's really advanced. So it's the same. And why not just do this program before you get that sick to begin with anyway? That would be the main thing. But I think that what I thought that would be good to talk about here was this idea that we all should be eating to protect ourselves against the common problems that could develop on a healthy plant-based diet when we're older, because we want to have our full mental faculties and memory intact later on in years. And that's where eating right and having a favorable omega-3 index, that combination can enable us to not have brain shrinkage with aging. And one thing I've done wrong, which I'm in mourning about, just to tell you an interesting thing, because you know how that David Wolf calls himself David Avocado Wolf. Remember that?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I used to joke around, and I just went on the stage in one of his conferences, and I said, "I'm Joel Cherimoya Fuhrman," because I loved cherimoyas. I'd come to California eating cherimoyas every day, and I put in 12 cherimoya trees because they're my favorite food. But unfortunately, and I'm in mourning over this, studies came out showing in Caribbean countries where people eat a lot of cherimoyas, they have higher risks of dementia and Parkinson's because of some chemical that's non-favorable, neurotoxin in the cherimoya, atamoya, soursop, sweet sop, these plants. And I rationalized, well, I don't eat that many of them. But then there was more studies that came out that showed even once a week there were increased risk of some dementia from the toxin in the cherimoya. So just yesterday, I ripped out my 6 cherimoya trees and my 6 atamoya trees and pulled them out of the ground and putting in putting in persimmons and apricots and different fruit trees. So I know it's not of interest to the vast population because they don't eat cherimoyas, but I'm just being conversational and just telling you in the morning of not eating cherimoyas anymore, because the last 5 years I've been eating a ton of cherimoyas because they're so delicious, which can actually cause dementia. But another major cause of dementia that's relatively new in this nutritional history we're finding out is bivalves and shellfish and crabs and lobster and mussels and oysters. And because we're finding that the agricultural runoff causing algae overgrowth, feeding the growth of cyanobacteria, is dumping BMAA into the coastal waterways and lakes. And people who live near lakes and eat lake fish, who live near coastal waterways and eat mussels and clams, we're seeing clusters of ALS and PDS, Parkinson's dementia syndrome. So I'm also more concerned about that. And there's also things that we have to keep aware of that we didn't know years ago. That we didn't know would be a negative thing for the brain. But we know a lot today. And yes, in answer to your question, Steve, that we can, I think that if we do everything right, dementia, we can protect against that. And that was one of my biggest concerns with people following plant-based and natural hygiene type diets through my early stage of my career, is because all my mentors and people I looked up to and all the founding members of the American Natural Hygiene Society, all these healthy plant-based whole food vegans who were older than me, and I was a young student, medical student coming up in that field, and they were the people I looked up to. So many of them developed Parkinson's disease or dementia due to the lack of knowledge about DHA being important for brain size with aging. And that's where I originally developed that concern, because Dr. Shelton had Parkinson's, and Dr. Sidwa had Parkinson's, and Dr. Vetrano, who took care of me when I was sick when I was young, got dementia, and Joy Gross got dementia, and all these people I knew who were leaders in the plant-based movement developed neurologic disease in later life. And then, of course, now we have, most studies, one study after another, more than 20 studies documenting low levels of omega-3 index linked to shrinkage of the brain with aging. So it's one of my main concerns, that to prevent dementia is have the healthy diet, because we know the standard American diet is going to get dementia from different reasons. They're going to get dementia because the person's not eating the, atherosclerotic dementia and lack of phytonutrients. But us super healthy eaters who are going to now live longer, want to protect the brain. And I also want to say that maybe if you're a healthy eater, or a person who's not going to live that long, then maybe that doesn't matter so much. If you're going to die at the average age of most Americans at 75 to 80, maybe paying attention to all these things isn't that critical, because you're not going to live long enough to see the brain shrinkage. But if you're going to really want to push the envelope to, past 95, then we got to protect our brain so we're alive, or at least enjoying our life.
So are you recommending that everyone supplement with like an algae-based DHA EPA?
No, I don't know if everyone needs to supplement, because a lot of people make enough on their own. You know what I mean? And it's very genetically determined in what they're eating. So some people have to supplement with more, some people have to supplement with a lot more, and some people have to supplement with none. It's based on their omega-3 index. I know some people whose levels are really excellent when they're not supplementing at all. But I know so many people whose levels are super low, and they need even and they need a higher dose of a little bit more. And the other thing that we should know is that taking 3 to 4 grams of fish oil a day, the high dose of fish oil, that's also not healthy. Like, too much of something's bad, and too little of being deficient is bad too. You want to be in that sweet spot. You don't want to take a pharmacologic dose of something. You want to take a nutritive dose to make sure you're not deficient. That's the main point here.
Okay, let me ask both of you a question that has been floating around for years and just can't seem to ever get it resolved fully. 11 years ago, we started this conference. Brian Clement was the guy I started with. He's spoken at every conference. He's a friend of mine. I've used him as to ask questions. But one thing he says that I hate with a passion, that's the most horrible thing he says, is he says, oh yeah, by the way, no matter what anyone says, I've looked at blood under the microscope for years, so is Anna Maria, and we are certain that fruit is hybridized today. It's picked unripe, but it's hybridized. It's too sweet. It is feeding yeast, mold, fungus, candida, and cancer. And I've asked him the question 100 times. All I want to do is be convinced that he's wrong, so I could just eat peaches and cherries and blueberries all day, because nothing would be more fun. But he's very passionate. He's very insistent. I'm not a scientist or a nutritionist or a doctor, and I don't, when he says it, I can't compete with what he's saying. But have you looked at what he's saying? Have you studied it? Have you listened if it's valid? He's not sort of saying it. He's fully saying that fruit should be dramatically limited. What do you think?
Are you asking me that first?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, doctor.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I did mention earlier that when you eat too much fruit, see, there's 5 types of plant foods, right? Whole grains. I think there's 5 types. Let's go through it. Whole grains, vegetables, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, and fresh fruit. Just 5 rough classes. The lowest protein is the fruit. Intact grains, vegetables, beans, and nuts and seeds are all high protein, relatively high protein foods. So if we're eating natural foods and not pouring oil on our food, because oil is diluting the protein in our diet, and we know that more plant protein, we live longer. So the concept, and we also know there's more anti-cancer phytochemicals in vegetables and beans compared to fruit. So as we increase the fruit in the diet, we're lowering the protein concentration in the diet, and we know more plant protein makes for longer life. So I mentioned earlier that these people on fruitarian diets, they're cutting the protein down too low. But now that we have that, there should be some limit to the fruit. So we eat enough vegetables and beans and nuts and whole intact grains, right? The fruit can't be unlimited. There has to be some limit to the fruit. Otherwise, our diet will be too low in protein. So now that we've assessed that we've agreed with Brian a little, somewhat, there has to be some limit to the fruit. The idea that fruit is hybridized, that's not really true. There may be in some foods, but there's some natural fruits that are available for generations from 30,000 years, like dates, and figs that haven't changed in millennium, and they've been food for human species, for gorillas and primates for like 100,000 years. So that's not true. And let's look at and it's like the guy who says beans are bad because they have lectins in them. Well, let's look at the study of people who eat beans and how long they live. Let's look at studies on people who eat fruit and how long they live. And we have a lot of data on that. We have, for example, the WHEEL study, the Women's Healthy Eating and Living study, showed that women who ate vegetables a lot had lower rates of cancer, but not as much longevity and cancer protection as people who eat vegetables and fruits. In other words, if you take any of those 5 foods out of the diet, maybe you can take grains out successfully, but if you take fruit out successfully, you drop down on some beneficial nutrients, and we drop down on some beneficial substances and fibers and flavonoids that extend human lifespan. And we have this unprecedented opportunity to live longer based on our variety of foods we can eat today. And we can eat such a huge variety in, let's say, in the modern world of organic food that, so I'm suggesting that we have this opportunity to eat sprouts and to eat homegrown vegetables and to eat all these healthy things that our ancestors didn't know about or couldn't do, and that it's not necessary or favorable to cut the fruit out of your diet, but we should be aware that we maybe should be consuming 1 or 2 fruits per meal, as a dessert, and not make fruit the center of the diet, because then your diet could be borderline insufficient in protein for children, toddlers, or the elderly. And so I guess I'm partially agreeing with Brian, but I think he's taking it too far and too extreme.
Okay, thank you. In terms of going very heavy on sprouts and greens, are you concerned about oxalates? We had a dentist who said that one of her patients' teeth was affected negatively because she had too many oxalates. Is this something that you have found credible or found in your experience? Should I be concerned?
How did that dentist know the teeth being rotten were from the oxalates? That's just a crazy hypothesis. But you go ahead. Do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that the people who talk about oxalates are talking about isolated incidents without direct evidence, or it's at best correlated. And it's very similar to, the oxalate argument is very similar to the lectin argument. And I believe that there's no reason, unless someone has a very specific, rare sensitivity or allergy to it, to overcompensate for the oxalates. And I think that if you peel back the onion and you go deep enough on the people that are concerned with this, and what the evidence says is generally the amount of oxalates that someone would have to take would exceed the amount that a normal person would have on normal consumption. So that's my response, to the lectin. The lectin argument is a different one, because I think when you no one eats raw legumes. You either cook them or you sprout them, which reduces the lectins. And from a level of oxalate perspective, I think that the benefits of eating these foods greatly outweighs the potential risk of the oxalates.
Thank you. Dr. Fuhrman, if someone...
By the way, I agree with what Doug just said. And I think that the only foods relatively high in oxalate, and who only eats those high oxalate foods, would be spinach, rhubarb, parsley, Swiss chard, and beet tops. Lettuce has almost no oxalates in it. And it's so rich in, so your calcium is almost 100% absorbable. So oxalates bind calcium, but kale and broccoli and sprouts and all these things all the foods we eat are relatively low in oxalate foods. So I think we should make it so we're not eating a salad all the time of always all spinach and all beet tops and rhubarb and Swiss chard because they're high in oxalates, but it doesn't mean we can't eat some of those. I can fine to eat 25% of your diet, of your salad from spinach, but because you want to have some of that calcium be readily available. So again, it's exaggerating some things that are only bad if you do it to the real extreme, like Doug just said. You have to be really extreme in trying to consume oxalates, because unless you're eating animal protein, the oxalates don't precipitate calcium into kidney stones in your kidney, and you don't precipitate out calcium in your urine unless you're eating animal products and your diet's too high in protein. So it's relatively a non-issue if people are eating a healthy, well-balanced diet.
Thank you. Dr. Fuhrman, if you were going to take care of a person, there was one person that was assigned to you and you were going to take care of them, and they said to you, and you said, how you doing? And they said, I don't know, I'm not really sure how my health is. Would you do any tests on them? Would you tell them to get a mammography or colonoscopy? Are there any screenings? Like, do you want to get a baseline? Is it necessary? Should we all get colonoscopies, mammographies? What do you?
Oh, I hate that question. I hate that. I'm making a joke. I kind of hate these questions, but I'll tell you why. Because, there's been so much focus on screening and doing tests on people that the medical profession does. And I'm saying, it's relatively unimportant, because it's your lifestyle that determines your health. And the most important screening test is step on the scale and see what you weigh. That's the most important screening test. And let me see what you eat. Let me see what your diet is. Write down a diet diary. That's the most important screening test. Who cares what your, blood tests and colonoscopies and mammograms, all this stuff? It's almost meaningless, because they have very little effect at overall mortality in a population. What really determines the mortality in a population is how healthy they live and their overall body weight. And we have the most horrible health in this country, and our health in this country is getting worse, not getting better, as people get more medical care, more testing, more drugs. Their waistline keeps getting bigger, and they still look to thinking the medical profession is going to save them with their testing, the diagnosing, and medicating themselves. And people are living in fear of getting disease and looking for disease, thinking if they find it, the doctor's going to save them. But let me tell you, doctors aren't going to save you. Only you can save yourself by the way you live. So I'm not saying yes, get it. I'm not saying no, get it. I'm just saying it's not the main thing that's going to govern the health of the society. It's, whether we get it or not, it's practically irrelevant. Now, go down deeper into the question. Was a person eating unhealthfully should get a Cologuard test or a colonoscopy? Probably. Am I going to get a Cologuard or a colonoscopy? No way. I'm not going to take a risk of a colonoscopy, getting an infection or getting perforated when my risk of colon cancer is almost nil living on a nutritarian diet. So the answer to your question is, I guess on an individual basis, there might be some people living unhealthily where those tests might be more of a benefit, but I personally wouldn't do it myself, or people who have been following this healthy way of living I advocate, like Doug and I, for most of our adult lives, And so I don't know if I answered your question all the way, but I think I gave somewhat of an answer.
What about, are you going to get the Galleria cancer blood test, where it's only a blood test and it tells your chances on 50 different cancer screenings? Are you going to get that?
Myself? No, I'm not going to get that.
Because
I'll tell you why. People come to me with a raising PSA, and they say, should they get a biopsy to see whether it's prostate cancer? And I'm saying, why don't you just assume it's cancer? Because every American that's over the age of 65 probably has cancer cells in their body already. If you're eating them like other Americans eat, you're going to have cancer cells in your body when you get to be 65 or 70 years old. So everybody has some cancer in their body if you're living on American food. So why don't you just change your life and change the way you're eating instead of just testing it? Testing is not going to save you. Changing your life to a healthy diet is going to save you. So I'm already eating as healthy as I can. Why do I want to look for cancer and think of more things I have to be nervous about? I just want to live as healthy as I can and enjoy my life as much as I can and stay focused on gratitude, letting pleasure from the outside world, helping other people, being more understanding and kind to others, and trying to have a much more joyous and passionate life, and not living in fear of medical conditions. You know what I mean? I want to enjoy the rest of my life and that's why we live so healthfully, so we can live without fear and be the best version of ourselves. I'm much less, would be looking to be testing people as a means of, I want people to have less medical care and less medical dependency and take charge of their health more themselves, and less dependency on physicians and testings, and less alternative doctors, and less and less naturopaths, and less, stay away from doctors. Look, I don't go to doctors. I don't even go to myself. That was a joke.
Let me ask you both.
It fit into one of my jokes, so I had to go there.
Let me ask you both 5 things. You could give me a yes or no to each of the 5. I want to know your thoughts on these 5 things. 1, CBD oil. 2, alcohol. 3, coffee. 4, marijuana or things within it, like greens, like gummies. And 5, the Beyond Impossible Burgers. So 1, CBD oil. 2, alcohol. 3, coffee. 4, marijuana or gummies that have marijuana in them. And 5, the Beyond Impossible Burgers. Those 5 things, any thoughts? 2 of you each.
Okay, Dr. Fuhrman, you have the privilege of going first.
My mind must be going, because I can't even remember the 5 things. It must have been all those cherimoyas I must have been eating last year.
CBD oil. CBD
No,
oil.
I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you. I got it. I was just making a joke.
Okay.
By the way, laughing makes you live longer, even if your joke is stupid. So even if it's like a stupid joke, it's still good to laugh anyway, All right. Well, let me preface that question with saying anything that has pharmacologic effects has some toxic effects. So I can give you a natural substance that's going to make your heart beat faster, or your heart beat slower, or make you urinate more or urinate less, or take away your pain or make you more energy. But the efficacy of the substance is proportional to its toxicity. Healthy things don't do anything to us. You eat broccoli or sprouts, you're not going to feel anything. You're going to feel nothing, because it's not toxic and it's not pharmacologic. So we're trying to avoid the need for medicinal substances. So just because a CBD product like THC or CBD could be somewhat put a person to sleep better, then it may be less toxic than a drug, or make it less toxic than an opiate for pain, you still build up tolerance to it. The more you take it, the less efficacious it becomes. It's still not an idea. The idea is not to take things that have medicinal effects. It's to avoid the need for medicinal substances. The fact that it builds up tolerance shows you it's not positive. It's not a health supporting substance. Alcohol is cancer causing. And sure, you can get some bioflavonoids from a wine, but that doesn't make the alcohol in the wine less non-carcinogenic, and you're better off having the flavonoids from food and not from alcohol. So it's not a health-promoting substance. You're better off if you don't have those things. Some people, like you said, are more sensitive and more fragile and have more genetic predispositions, and maybe a lot of people can get away with some of those things, but some people can't. The Beyond Burgers and the Impossible Burgers, and also these new functional, lab-grown meats are probably, overall beneficial to society, because people aren't going to want to eat healthy foods, and they want to maybe cut back on taking down the rainforest to grow more beef. So maybe there's benefits to society. I'm not against the point of it, but I wouldn't eat that stuff. I'd feel sick if I had it. I wouldn't sleep well at night from all the salt and all the grease. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't digest it well. I wouldn't feel well. I wouldn't recommend it. People have it, especially. I feel it really feels good to feel good. It really feels good emotionally to feel good all the time. And why would you want to take things in your body to make yourself feel worse or be less healthy? To be self-destructive. I don't really get that much, because we're just enjoying our life too much to interfere with that. All right. Should I go to fasting, or you want to?
Coffee, marijuana, and could do fasting also. Coffee, marijuana, and
fasting.
Think
I described CBD and marijuana and gummies. I think it's all in the same. I think I could have said enough about that already. You know what I mean? It doesn't prevent cancer. You're putting in toxins in your body. It's better not to smoke it. If you're eating it in food, it may be helpful to some people who have serious medical conditions, but it's still better if they don't have to take it. It still builds up tolerance. It's still better. You wouldn't need those things. So it's not something that's really health supporting. I don't recommend you taking in CBD, marijuana as a health reason. If you have to do it for medical reason, even that, it's probably it's not probably good to do it long term. Occasional use if you can't sleep or something under tremendous stress, or you're in pain with an accident, may be okay for temporary use for some of those reasons, but would not recommend for long-term use. Coffee, is okay for some people, but it's not something I recommend either, because even though there's a lot of bioflavonoids and some protective substances in coffee, it still has addictive properties to it and can cause withdrawal from it. When you try to stop it, you can get headaches. You can mistake the coffee withdrawal for hunger and make you want to eat to eat more to remove that withdrawal symptom of the buzz you get from caffeine withdrawal. I don't like to consume so many browned or darkened or burnt substances in the diet. Maybe a little bit might be okay, but it's not something I recommend people do either, though they do so many things that are worse. And for most people, they eat no beans and no flavonoids and no sprouts, so the little bit of coffee gives them some exposure to flavonoids. Is probably better than nothing for a standard American diet person, but for us, health nuts, I don't think we should. It's not something I would advocate. And the last thing is fasting, right?
Yes.
I think it's good you're asking me that question, because, I wrote the book on fasting in 1996. I wrote a book called Fasting and Eating for Health in 1996, and I've utilized fasting as a therapeutic modality my whole career. And so let me just say two things. That as having fasting as a tool in my toolbox has enabled me to help some people I couldn't otherwise have helped. And I'll give you an example. This person wakes up in the middle of the night to take inhalers for asthma, and they can't do aerobics classes or do heavy exercise, or they start wheezing too much. Their whole life is revolved around taking their asthma inhalers. So I'm saying to them, I can get rid of their asthma, and I take them off their beta agonists, increase their inhaled steroids, get their health and cleaned up, and I get them so they're not so inflamed. And over a period of months, now I'm gradually cutting back their inhaled steroid use, little by little over a 6-month period, trying to clear up their lungs. And now I want to take away their steroids completely when I think they're not going to have an asthma attack. And to take it away, if they start to wheeze a little, or if I want to start them fasting as I'm taking it away, it helps suppress inflammation and curtails the hyperactive immune response and finishes the detoxification process. So it assures me this person is not going to have an asthma attack. So doing that fast at the end of the 6-month wean gave me the security to know that they would be breathing fine, and further putting the finishing touches up on the artwork we've just created, and having this being a new human being with a new immune system who's never going to have an asthma attack the rest of their life. So likewise, I've fasted people. I have people with inflammatory bowel disease who I fast 2 and 3 days a month, just because it helps curtail the inflammation in their gut from the natural tendency they have to have an irritated gut lining. So fasting can be useful as a therapeutic tool.
And when you say fasting, do you mean 1 day a week, a 7-day fast? How long are your fasts?
I'm saying with regard to that asthma case, with its fast might have been between 7 and 14 days in that case. So that, but with regard to the inflammatory bowel disease cases with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, they might be fasting 2 to 3 days each month, like in a row, 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row each month, right?
On just water?
On just water, yes, to rest their bowel each month.
Great, thank you.
But now the question is, what about the majority of Americans? Don't forget, 90% of Americans are food addicted, overweight people. And my major person I care for and work with are overweight people who have trouble staying with eating healthfully. They're distracted and they still continue to consume foods that are self-destructive. And when you put these overweight individuals on a fast, you excessively slow the metabolic rate down, and they become too often more food obsessed. And they don't stay with the diet after the fast does not make them stay compliant more when the fast is over, as is claimed. So many of them go back to their former way of eating and gain the weight back and more. I'm much more careful nowadays to make sure that people learn to eat healthfully and stay within that caloric window in which they don't become food obsessed, that they can still lose weight at 2 or 3 pounds per week. I might cut a person. So even the intermittent fasting of cutting people down to 500 to 800 calories a day can trigger some of these obese and overweight food addicts into binging again. And the fasting and binging mentality, and they're going to try to gain weight and go on a long fast again, and gain weight and go on a long fast again, is not the formula for long-term successful great health. The formula for long-term successful great health is to learn how to live and be healthfully and stay within that healthy window consistently for the rest of your life. It's being consistent in what you do day in and day out. And too many times, fasting can lead to people going off the diet and binging. And now that the metabolic rate is excessively slowed from fasting, they're going to gain even more weight back. And so they're going to yo-yo. So I'm more cautious with the use of fasting, and I do not recommend it for people who are not, who have food addiction symptoms or are overweight and haven't proved their ability to be consistent with eating healthfully. Because there are people who are very successful in controlling their weight and moving from fasting to a healthy diet and sticking with it. But for too many people, which I consider the majority of people, it doesn't make for more likelihood of success. It makes for more likelihood of recidivism. So I'm not advocating fasting for all people. I'd rather them learn how to eat consistently healthy long-term and not restrict calories that severely.
Thank you. Doug, if you could answer those same 6 questions, then give us your final thoughts, and then give us how we could stay in touch with you. So those comment on those 6 things, then any final thoughts, and then how we could get in touch with you.
Okay. So on CBD, I've never consciously or deliberately consumed CBD or used it topically. Do I think it's probably better than a pharmacological solution? Probably, but I don't know enough about it. It's not in my wheelhouse. Alcohol, I think alcohol is a metabolic poison. I think it kills every cell in the body. I think it creates all sorts of problems with internal organs. And as Dr. Fuhrman said, can and does cause cancer. Coffee, I think, stimulates the adrenals. It's very easy to cherry pick and find good things about coffee. I think coffee masks the fact that someone is not well rested, they're not well focused, they're not well nourished, and gives them an artificial sense, of being. That being said, there's thousands of studies. And if you want to find a study that says coffee helps with concentration and coffee adds to longevity, et cetera, I'm sure you can find it. I don't do coffee. Marijuana, smoking, eating, gummies, there's a whole phase of a fad or a momentum around marijuana and cannabis. I think people are self-medicating and they're masking other issues with it. That being said, is marijuana better than SSRIs or others? Out of my area of focus and expertise, I don't do it. I don't know much about it. I haven't smoked marijuana since I was a juvenile delinquent at age 13. And that goes for the gummies or the edibles. Although I think it's funny that Mike Tyson has an edible, with Evander Holyfield's part of his ear. I think that's funny. In terms of Impossible Burger and Beyond Burgers, I don't consume them. I think that the Beyond Burger is probably more natural than the Impossible Burger with the genetically modified heme iron. I also think, and I was just at Natural Products Expo, and I met with the chairman of Beyond Meat, and he was talking about their new formulation, which is more natural, less oils, avocado oil, et cetera. Do I think that if someone wants a burger, I would rather see them consume a Beyond Burger than a hamburger from a cow, for a whole litany of reasons that I think are obvious, so I won't go into. I will say, back to cannabis, I do believe organic cannabis leaves, when juiced, create the non-psychoactive substance THCA, which is the precursor to the psychoactive THC, which occurs when you heat at high temperatures the cannabis leaves. or the like. And I think THCA, when juicing cannabis, could be a healthy green, but I think it's rare and it's a corner case situation. I've had it, tastes pretty intense, and I think the hemp plant, I've sprouted hemp seeds, and I like hemp seeds, and I think hemp seeds are a good source of protein and a good source of omega-3s. So I think the hemp/cannabis plant has some positive benefits and attributes, and I think they're better than traditional pharmacological solutions.
And fasting?
I think fasting is incredible. I believe in guided fasting. I think fasting is dangerous if done on your own. I think fasting could be dangerous if you are on medications. So I've had direct exposure to someone who was on several medications and they went on a fast. And as a result of being on the fast, their body was rapidly changing, and the amount of drugs and pharmaceutical prescriptions they needed wasn't adjusted. And as a result, they ended up having a cardiac arrest. So I think that there could be severe consequences for playing with something as serious as fasting with it. Now, that being said, I think fasting in the right environment can be extremely positive, whether it be green juice fasting or water fasting or dry fasting, under the supervision, of experts.
Thank you. And any final thoughts you want to leave us with, and how do we stay in touch with you?
So my name is Doug Evans. My book is on Amazon for practically free. It's $12. You can find me on Instagram at Doug Evans. You can find my company is thesproutingcompany.com, and I'm on TikTok at SproutWiz. And I've probably done 50 interviews on YouTube. So just type Doug Evans and Sprouts. And I really want to acknowledge you, Steve, someone who could just be, living the life of leisure, put so much of your time and your money and your energy and your passion into trying to spread the real truth about health, that I don't think enough people acknowledge you for taking your time, to put this all together. So thank you. Thank you for having me. Joel, always a pleasure to see you. You are a legend. I love your work. I've read your books. I've been to your facility. And if you ever go, and I highly recommend going to the Eat to Live retreat facility, you will see that Joel is the hardest working guy there. And if he's not with a patient, he's with the guard. He's in the garden working, which is why he looks so good, for where he is in the stage of his life.
Doug, if we want to get, do you have any kind of consulting or groups or any training or anything to follow up with about your sprouting?
I have a free masterclass available. It's a 5-day masterclass that I did with Commune, and the URL there is www.onecommune.com/Doug. And you can get a deep masterclass on sprouts. It's professionally recorded, and it goes into how to sprout, why to sprout, what to do with the sprouts. You can also download a free sprouting app available to all people from thesproutingcompany.com. And we created that app to help people sprout so they know how long to soak the seeds. We give them notifications, when to rinse, when to harvest, and guide people along the way to the journey. So it's part of my public service commitment to helping people get healthy through sprouting.
Thank you. Dr. Fuhrman, any closing thoughts, and how can we stay in touch with you and your work and your retreats?
Well, thank you, Stephen, and thanks for the work you're doing, as well as you, Doug. I appreciate you both very much.
Thank you.
And yes, I'm at drfuhrman.com, and I have online events. I have a detox weight loss event online where I give people instruction, lectures, questions, and interactions. I have one coming up in May, a 21-day event, but I have ongoing events people want to, and I also have the Eat to Live Masterclass available at drfuhrman.com. People can learn more about my work, as well as you know, I've written many books. My most recent book is Eat for Life. But in any case, people are welcome to ask me questions on my website, learn more about what I'm talking about. And of course, my major goal is to encourage people to embrace healthy living and healthy eating and to stay with this long term for the rest of their life. And it's not easy to do for many people. And we help give them the tools they need to achieve this in an enjoyable and tasty way so they can stick with it. So, so thanks for hosting all of us and for all the good work you guys all do.
Thank you. And can someone do a phone consultation with you? Can they come to your retreat center and for a week or 10 days, or how does that work?
No, the retreat, they can go to the event, drfuhrman.com events, and they can call the 800 number to learn more about the retreat. But our minimum stay is 1 month because we're a small facility. And we feel that people don't really benefit long term if they don't really embrace this for a long enough period of time. So the 1 month stay is minimum at the retreat, but they can call our 800 number and learn more about it. Thank you. And I do not generally do phone consults unless people plan on coming to the retreat. Then I'll speak to them in advance before they get here. But I mostly communicate with the public. If people want my advice about their condition, they can join drfuhrman.com as a member, and they can ask me questions directly through the website in the Ask the Doctor forum. And I communicate with a lot of people every single day that way. I'm communicating with hundreds of people and answering their medical questions for them.
Thank you both so much. If we could unmute everyone so everyone else could say thank you as well.
What that looks like, though.
Thank you. Great talk.
I got
Great
one there and
talk.
one there.
Thank
I don't
you.
need any more. Hold on.
Okay, both of you, thank you so much. Thank you, and good night. Thank you so much.
Good night.